All right, guys, we are live here. Nelson Sousa and my buddy Chris Vaccaro, we decided to split a NFFC playoff team, and we wanted to get on a quick show and talk about it and talk about the format, the strategy behind it, and then build the team actually live as we go through it. So here at the NFFC, they have a $200 entry playoff hold'em contest, and first place is 150,000. Okay, it pays down, but obviously it's pretty top heavy. Um, you're looking at a format where it's a multiplier format. Okay, so if I show you, let's see. So let me pull up rosters, right? So you're taking a maximum of 12 players, okay, total. That's including a team kicker and a team defense. So you're essentially going to be fading two teams. So I think everybody in the industry calls it this, and I call it this is, who are your two hard fades? So you have to make a decision on the two teams that you're going to fade, at least to start the contest. And then there's a soft fade, which is basically team kicker, team defense. Okay. So ideally, we'll get into strategy. So let me just finish this format, because I was going to say, ideally, your team kicker and team defense, you want one and done. You don't want to be having multipliers of those. But there's a lot of strategy and different ways to go about it.
And some people will tell you the opposite, Nelson. Some people tell you want your kicker and defense, around a couple, maybe win a couple rounds, so you don't have to replace them right away. That's also another thought process of people. As we get into this show, Nelson, there's so many different ways to play this and so many different strategies. We'll be covering as many as we can.
Yeah. We need to start two quarterbacks, okay, in this format, 3 running backs, 4 wide receiver / tight ends, and then 1 flex spot. Okay.
Which is a lot better way to do it, Nelson, right? Because the old NFFC way up until about a couple years ago was 4 running backs and 4 wide receivers / tight ends. Now in the last couple of years, we chopped off 1 running back position, added the flex. So if you want to go 5 straight, 5 receivers, 3 running backs, it's your preference, which I like that a lot better.
Yeah, they definitely tweaked the format, and I think this helps. Where with 4 running backs, it was overkill. I like,
especially in those dead running back years, man. There was a couple years, Nelson, where you think back to 4 or 5 years ago in this playoff contest, we'd get to the fantasy playoffs, and maybe 2 or 3 teams had a decent running back, and you're putting in a scrub just to fill out the 3rd and 4th running back spot. Times have changed a little bit. We have some decent running backs in the playoffs here, but not as many as, wide receivers and tight ends.
Sure. Yeah, no, exactly. So let me see. I'm going to go to, let's see. I'm going to increase this a little bit. See if this helps. All right. That's a little bit better to see.
Yeah.
So in this format, what you got to try to figure out is, so round 1, wild card round, it's ×1. Okay. The second round is ×2. So if your player advances and you've got them in your lineup week 1 and they advance, they're now ×2 multiplier. Round 3, okay, which is basically the conference finals, any player that you had in there from the first week are now ×3 multiplier. And then in the Super Bowl, your players that you had from the first week are now ×4. Okay. So the interesting strategy is this. I like to build it backwards. So rather than go like, okay, let's look at the matchups this week and decide how we're going to build the lineup. I want to go and predict the Super Bowl. Who do I, for this particular team, I look at it as like, all right, Chris, who do we like in the Super Bowl? Who do we think has in the range of outcomes, like who's got the best odds to make the Super Bowl? Is there a team that we think is kind of like a dark horse that doesn't have very good odds that we think could be in the Super Bowl? And then you want to build the team off of that. You want to base your decisions off of that. So it's kind of like you're telling yourself a story as you go along the way, right?
Yes.
And what's so important is this. For example, let's just say we think it's Lions and Chiefs, okay? The two number one seeds, okay? And there's many different ways at that point. Once you decide, okay, I think it's Lions and Chiefs, you could go Mahomes and Goff, okay, to start week 1. They're on a bye, okay? You're going to get a 0. It is what it is, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But then the following week, now Mahomes and Goff are ×2, right?
Yeah. Get comfortable looking at 1800th place or something like that after the first week, and don't be intimidated by it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't even look at the standings in this thing until week 3.
Yeah, because you're gonna face teams that have Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen,
Right.
Darnold, Jalen Hurts,
Mm-hmm.
Jaden Daniels, Baker Mayfield, you name it, guys that went off, played in week 1, maybe not went off, but you're going to be behind on those guys, right?
100%.
But
especially if you don't use the 2 quarterbacks. Yep.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So then what ends up happening is the following week, naturally, you're going to want to add a Chiefs player and a Lions player. So as you build this roster, right, with your running backs and your wide receivers here, you almost want to guarantee yourself that you are putting in at the running back, wide receiver / tight end spots, even in the flex spot, one and dones. You want to guarantee yourself that you have players that are going to be toast after this round, okay? For the reason that you want to start stacking basically your Lions and Chiefs players. Yeah. So once they make the Super Bowl, ideally you want to have, let's just say if you start Mahomes and Goff, they're going to be ×4. Let's say the following week you add Worthy or Kelsey and you add, let's say, Gibbs. Ideally in the Super Bowl, they're going to be ×3. As they progress through the rounds and they get to the conference championship, right? You then add, let's say, Amon-Ra, and you add, let's say, Pacheco, or you add the guy you didn't add out of Worthy and Kelsey. And now they're ×2, okay? And then Super Bowl week, you're going to add one last Chiefs and Lions player. They're going to be ×1, okay? So however you want to build it, okay? I'm not saying that you have to go Mahomes and Goff, okay? You can go a different route. You can say, you know what? In the Super Bowl, I want Gibbs ×4. I don't want Goff ×4. I want maybe Goff ×3. So then you would start, let's say, like Mahomes at quarterback, right? And then you would go Gibbs at running back but then you want to set it up where if you want Goff ×3, you got to add a quarterback in the second quarterback slot that is going to be one and done. So ideally you want someone that scores well, has a good game, but in a losing effort. Go ahead.
And to your point, and to your point, Nelson, when you said earlier about, you have to tell yourself a story and then you build this backwards. I agree. I sit down, I say, all right, who do I like for the Super Bowl? Right. Okay. Now I go back and I go through the whole bracket and I say, okay, this game I like, this is how it's going to play. Now, not only am I looking at that game and saying, all right, example, Vikings versus Rams. Okay, I think it'll be a high scoring game. What players do I like in that one? All right, that. Now, if I have that particular team wins and maybe like the 6 seed beats the 3 seed that I like, well, now I'm like, all right, well, now that bracket becomes what? Vikings versus, Eagles in that second game, whereas Washington then plays the Lions. Well, now what kind of game do I like? And this is just, I'm throwing these matchups out there. Like, who would I like in that Vikings versus Eagles game? Now, just say Eagles are a terrible run defense, pass defense, but a great run defense. Okay, well, now I want the receivers in that Viking-Eagles matchup. And I start planning out my players. All right, well, I have, Jefferson in week 1. Well, now I want Addison in that game as well for week 2. And I start planning out my matchups and how, I think you said it to me yesterday about how, Saquon or Derrick Henry, if they advanced, he would play this particular team. They would have a good run defense. Well, I would want Lamar in that game more than Derrick Henry. That's the way you got to start planning it. You don't want to get in a position where you're like, all right, I have this running back, I bring him in, but they're playing all these tough run defenses, and I'd rather have the receivers. So you kind of have to map out how you have the games going, kind of nail them, to be honest with you, and predict the games right and how the players are going to perform in them when you're building out this contest, in my opinion.
Yeah. And the one thing that I've noticed in terms of the defenses in the playoffs this year is I want to say the Chiefs and the Eagles overall are solid all around. Okay. And I guess maybe the Chargers statistically are pretty solid. But one thing that I have noticed is a lot of the defenses are just very good against the run rather than the pass. Okay. Yeah. Eagles are pretty much elite against the run. Yeah. The Chiefs have been elite against the run. The Chargers have been very good against the run. The Lions have been very good against the run.
Surprisingly.
Terrible against the pass, except for, last week against the Vikings. Yeah. Great game plan, by the way, by Aaron Glenn. But and then you have the Vikings, good against the run, bad against the pass, except for last week where Gibbs tore them up. But statistically, they've been pretty good, very solid against the run, but weak against the pass. So that's the question is, do you want to, obviously you got to fill in running backs, and we have a couple of stud running backs in the playoffs, right? We have Saquon, Henry, and Gibbs, right?
Yeah.
Those are the three monsters, right?
Sure.
So, but
with some good secondary ones too, Nelson.
There is
Irving.
Yeah, absolutely.
James Cook.
What I'm trying to figure out too is if I'm predicting who's in the Super Bowl, I almost wonder, put it this way, Saquon, Henry, and Gibbs are going to be pretty chalky in this format. Okay. And I think people are going to add them first week of the playoffs. So they're going to be times 4. So,
and I think it'll go in that order too, Nelson. With Gibbs, and I think it'll be in that order: Gibbs, Barkley, Henry, ownership wise.
Yes, because I do think there's going to be quite a bit of Lamar versus Hurt,
and we'll get into that. Yeah,
there'll be way more Lamar. So so here's one of my things that I try to predict, and again, this is this could be like galaxy braining, and I'm overthinking this. But I'm looking at it as, okay, in the Super Bowl, because I'm building it backwards. If I say, I think it's Ravens, Eagles, let's say something like that. You know what? Saquon's going to be highly owned. I do want Saquon at some point. But you know what? Maybe I go A.J. Brown, because I might be behind those Saquon teams going into the Super Bowl. But A.J. Brown times 4 against like the Ravens secondary, I want to be kind of like in that short list of people that have A.J. Brown times 4. Because if he's the one that goes off and the Ravens somehow, limit Saquon, and he's been a monster all year. So I'm not predicting saying that Saquon, that he's going to do that. But this contest, again, there's a lot of theory. There's a lot of strategy. Some of it requires just some like common sense, thinking. But there's a lot of luck involved at the end of the day. In, in
100%.
in this
100%.
type of contest. So rather than I'm looking at it saying, rather than me just eating all the chalk and just going Saquon, this and that, I don't want to have to try to thread the needle with the other players to be different from all the other Saquon teams that are going to be in hypothetically speaking, guys, if the Eagles make the Super Bowl, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to have all this times 4 Saquon or times 4 Gibbs, right?
Because you're just a sheep in the herd. Yeah.
So my theory, and it could prove to be a losing effort, okay, is I want to go Amon-Ra and AJ Brown that are going to be not so much lesser owned, but like they're multipliers. More people are going to go Gibbs Saquon than Amon-Ra AJ Brown. And I want those guys in the Super Bowl. Because if the Lions meet, let's say the Ravens or Bills or Chiefs, I think the Chiefs are much more dominant against the run than they are against the pass. So I look at it as I want the receiver against those teams rather than the running back.
So this is definitely one of the topics I wanted to bring up, because the more I thought about this contest in the last 24 hours, this is what stuck out to me is, this contest based around Lions and Eagles, right? Everyone, the percentage is going to be crazy high. Everyone that, we're playing against 2,000 plus entries probably in the bigger NFFC contest. Also, for everyone listening to the show tonight, there is a $50 entry format, same game. If you don't want to play the $200 level, it's a $50,000 overall prize for that one. You could play that one. But the more I think about it, Nelson, I think you hit on it. Listen, everyone's going to jump in there, and especially when they're looking at those running back positions, they're going to say, okay, I could get the 2 best players in football and fantasy pretty much and go Saquon, Gibbs, and move on, right? Mm-hmm. But you're just going to be, in that 80 percentile probably with these guys. But when you think about it, I see it this way. You have 3 teams in the NFC that are contenders, 3 teams in the AFC that are contenders. I know you like the Chargers as well. So someone like you would be adding them into that. I can't see the Chargers going to the Super Bowl. But the Lions, Eagles, and Vikings are the top 3 contenders there. The Bills, Ravens, and Chiefs are the only 3 teams in the AFC I could see going. So out of those teams, I think we're all focused in on quarterback-wise, Lamar and Josh Allen, right? Yeah. And Lamar and Josh Allen, most people are going to have at least one of those 2 guys in as one of their quarterbacks. And I think a lot of entries are going to have Lamar and Josh Allen, right? The problem I see now thinking about this contest is my strategy's always been clear up wide receiver spots for the 2nd round, 3rd round, beyond. And that's the way I've always played this contest. But the way I've thought about it is, I want that quarterback in and then to bring in my receivers along with them for that passing game. But these teams don't have go-to guys. Like, they spread it around. If you have Josh Allen and you're like, all right, great, week 2, I'm bringing in. Who are you bringing in? Shakir, Amari Cooper, Kincaid, this one, that one. Lamar spreads it around. If Zay Flowers is healthy, there's Andrews, Bateman. There's not a go-to guy once you start clearing the path of the people that build Ravens and Bills teams with Lamar and Allen. Everyone's going to have that opinion going, the Bills are going to the Super Bowl. I'm going to put Josh Allen in week 1 and get him X4. Same thing everyone's going to say, I got the Ravens going. A lot of people like us are fading the Chiefs and don't like them. So you're going to have one of these quarterbacks in. But I think you're going to find it hard as you go on to, fill in these wide receiver spots to bring in Lamar, wide receivers for Lamar to hook up with.
You feel more comfortable. So, Chris, you feel more comfortable at the end of the day if you build Lamar, Josh Allen teams. You feel more comfortable adding Henry and James Cook. Those are like the more comfortable plays at running back rather than adding the receiver.
Right. Yeah, I do. You're definitely going to have those guys as the two running backs that you want to add right away once you get going in this contest, I feel. But that's just a different format and different thinking for me playing this contest. So it really had me thinking in the last 2 days, which brings me back to my point about you talking about the Lions and the Eagles. It's easier to build out your roster for this contest with putting a Goff in there right off the bat or a Jalen Hurts right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
You have a big time offense. We could see either the Lions or the Eagles. Most people are going to have either one of those two teams going to the Super Bowl in the NFFC, in the NFL this year. And if you start your team with Goff or Hurts, and then flip it and either have Allen or Lamar, now at least you're getting you could build out your team. I'm saying with Lions. Now you come back week 2 with Amon-Ra. Maybe you go Laporta week 3, Jameson. Now I know what you're going to say, Nelson. Well, whoa, what happened to Gibbs? Well, that's how you fade the contest, right?
Well, that
and it sounds crazy, and it sounds crazy.
It's not crazy. It's not crazy to me because I'm just as fucking crazy as you when it comes to that kind of contrarian way of thinking. Because I don't want to listen. There's a lot of like good chalk, and sometimes the chalk plays come in. Okay, but when you're playing a top heavy contest like this, we're chasing 150K. We're going to go up against 2,200 teams. Okay, so I want to look at it and see where I can be different within reason. I don't want to get too crazy, but I mean, here's my theory. Okay, I don't mind going Goff and then adding Amon-Ra the following week because Montgomery's supposed to be back. Okay, and
you took the words
you already
out of my
know
mouth.
how I am. I don't get biased with like, especially like recent performances. That doesn't bias me in terms of how I set my lineups or how I draft off of last year's numbers, things like that. I'll fade a guy who I had like 50% ownership. We're talking in terms of like season long. I'll have a guy, I'll have Puka, 50% ownership last year and fade him this year. I'm not afraid of doing that. And the thought behind it is Montgomery's going to be back. And as good as Gibbs has been, us as fantasy players, we watch the games. We know Gibbs is a better player than Montgomery. We know he's way more electric, and he should have been getting way more touches than he was during the season. But Montgomery is a damn good running back. He's still solid, and Dan Campbell loves that guy. Okay? He's going to get playing time. This is not going to be a Saquon Barkley type of.
Yes, 100%.
Where he just takes the full workload. Montgomery comes back and he's just kind of like on the sidelines and mixing in. No, I think this goes right back to the committee.
I think this contest and the way you had to look at it in the last 24 hours changed, and that was the biggest thing that I wanted to talk about on the show is because 24 hours ago we didn't even know if Montgomery would be back, and now it seems like he's real close, and he's got this extra week, and we could wake up next weekend when the Lions get going and that game starts, and you see Montgomery in the backfield, and he's getting 12 to 15 carries, and when they're on the 1 yard line, you see Montgomery, and all of a sudden you got to wipe what you just watched for the last month with Gibbs as the number one fantasy player out of your memory. And maybe a lot of people in this field already entered their lineups and put it in, and they put Gibbs in as their first click, because I know when I put this contest in a couple days ago, first click, boom, Gibbs in, right?
Especially after that game,
people did that.
Week 18.
Yeah, of course. So now, I think your outlook with the Lions can maybe we have an out, is what I'm saying. When building this contest and these teams, maybe Gibbs isn't that 90% owned running back that we thought he would be 24 hours ago. Maybe he comes down a little bit. And even if he doesn't, and even if he's 75% owned, I'd rather be in that 25% thinking outside the box than with the 75% if I'm trying to beat 2,200 others. And this is a way, I think, this is a team, the Lions pass offense, as you build out and you look at their games and who they would play. Well, I wouldn't hate having Goff, St. Brown, and maybe Jameson Williams, or maybe slip a Gibbs in there at some point if you want down the road. But maybe the first game you catch a big Goff to Amon-Ra game in week 1. And now you're ahead of all the people that build Gibbs in week 1. Gibbs from the start.
Yeah,
and I think you can look at the Eagles the same way.
I don't hate that. I like it. We're going to have multiple teams. So I'm definitely going to have Gibbs. So don't get me wrong. Like, I think you're probably going to have a couple of Gibbs teams also.
Absolutely.
But the way we're thinking of it is we look at like range of outcomes. And in the range of outcomes, Montgomery goes back into a committee with Gibbs. Gibbs is not now as scary to fade or go against the grain on. Okay. And throughout the playoffs, maybe it is Amon-Ra that is like a great pivot off of Gibbs. They're throwing the ball more, involved in shootouts. And then in the Super Bowl, which is like the ultimate X factor, is, okay, I now have Goff, who, if you look back during the season, Goff had a lot of sneaky 30-plus point games in this format. Okay. And I mean, it was during the shootout,
be in the dome, right? The whole time.
Didn't he have a 50-point game? He had a 50-point game, right?
Versus the Bills.
Yes. Yeah. So it's not like we're picking a quarterback that lacks upside. Okay. So Goff could be spreading it around, okay, in the Super Bowl, throwing touchdowns to everyone. Amon-Ra catches a couple of them, and they're the difference makers versus the Gibbs teams that went with him times 4. So
Gibbs can get his 18 to 20 points in any of these games throughout the playoffs. But what I'm trying to do is, I'd be scared if I was trying to fade Gibbs and Monty wasn't around. Well, now I could get burnt right off the bat when Gibbs drops another 35 or 40. I think with Monty back around now, maybe it's a better chance that he's capped at a certain number of touches, a certain number of catches. Maybe it's, maybe those 35, 40 ceiling games for Gibbs are off the table now with Monty in the backfield. Even if Monty's out there 40, 50% of the times, at least now it's a solid fade, in my opinion. It's not an automatic, set it and forget it with Gibbs. You have options with the Lions now.
Sure.
That's the way I see it. The Eagles are a different story, Nelson. The Eagles are another team. You could build it however which way. You could start off your tournament with Hurts, follow it up with AJ and Devonta if you want to go straight pass game. Because guess what? You come into the week 1. I like them. I like the Eagles versus the Packers. If Tampa Bay wins their game, Tampa Bay coming into Philadelphia, I love the chances of the Eagles being in that NFC Championship game against Detroit in a shootout, okay, in the Dome.
And having to throw the ball.
Let me set it up. Give me Hurts in the shotgun, throwing it all around, Who knows? Maybe Barkley has a 17-point game in the NFC Championship game, and Hurts goes and drops his 330 with 3 touchdowns, and he runs for 60. And I have him X from the start. So there's different ways to play the Eagles as well, but it comes down to which team in the NFC do you like making a run to the Super Bowl.
All right, so let me ask you this, Chris. We talked about the top 2 seeds. I think everybody's number 3 seed or favorite for everybody was Minnesota. And I think me included, I think that game against Detroit where they didn't show up has biased people. So my question to you is, who's the third team that you like out of the NFC, or do you think it's a 2-horse race?
No, I think Minnesota definitely has to be included in that. No doubt about it. I don't think that we can overlook what we saw for the last 3 months. I watched them on a weekly basis. It's a legit team. Their defense, if you remember, in the beginning of the season, was playing lights out. They were the top fantasy defense. They were killing it. They fell apart a little bit, but both sides of the ball, they're a solid team. I think they're right there with Philadelphia and Detroit. I really do. I know that everyone's got that Week 18 game fresh in their mind. Listen, they moved the ball. They got the ball down there. They just screwed up every time they got inside the 10-yard line. If Cam Akers finishes off that 60-yard run in the first minute of the second half, Vikings have the lead, So, sure. And it's a different game maybe. So, no, I think the Vikings are a contender. I will tell you this. I'm scared shitless that, we talked about, I was shocked that the Vikings were only laying 1.5 when the line came out, and now they're a pick'em. It didn't go up, to 2.5 or 3 when the money starts pouring in on the Vikings. The Vikings are down to a pick'em on my sites. So it smells like shit. And usually Vegas is right. So if the Vikings are one and done and they lose on Monday night, a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money, I think.
So here's my thought. I actually think that there's a couple of teams live in the NFC. I know that game against the Saints, you didn't like it at all, how must-win situation and the way Baker and Tampa Bay came out and played against the Saints, which should have been just should have just walked right through them. But at the end of the day, they still got it done. And I think Tampa Bay is dangerous enough that as the number 3 seed and getting a home game, if they beat the Commanders, they get another home game. I think you could see them playing, 2 to 3 games. Okay. And then
wait, let me stop you right there. Let me stop you right there, Nelson, because I don't know if Tampa cannot, well, only if the Eagles lose. If Tampa wins their first game, they're going on the road in week 2. They can't play 2 home games unless Philly loses.
Yeah. So unless that's right. Unless Philly loses. So
okay.
I guess,
and I think that's a terrible matchup to me, and that's taking Tampa. Mid-January, it'll probably be 25 degrees. You're taking that defense on the road to Philadelphia. That's the one reason I'm completely out on Tampa. I think they overachieved this year. I think that defense sucks. And, offensively, they exceeded expectations for me because of the, emergence of Bucky Irving on this team. But I just can't see Tampa winning more than their opening game versus Washington, which I think is a 50-50 game.
How about the Rams? So you have the Rams with playoff-tested Stafford. They've won a Super Bowl. You already know how I feel about McVay. I think he's a very good coach.
I'm with you.
You have Puka. Cup fell off at the end of the season, but you still have Puka and Cup. You have Kyron in the running game, and they have this young, sneaky defense. They've been pretty decent this year. So do you think at all, obviously, if they beat the Vikings, you think there's any chance? Let's just play it out. The top seeds win, right? And you have Tampa going to Philly. You think Rams have any shot against Detroit?
I would give them a puncher's chance. I really would. I think the Lions would beat them, but you take Stafford back into Detroit and you let Puka and Cooper Kupp and the rest of those guys running around, Atwell, DeMarcus Robinson, let them all. It could cause trouble for that Lions secondary. It sounds crazy after what they just did with Minnesota, but the Rams could stay with them for a while. I don't think that's a great matchup that Detroit wants to see.
Yeah, and the only reason why I'm bringing this up is because I want to kind of rule out how we're going to build these teams. So I think
Mm-hmm.
I think at the end of the day, we're talking Detroit, Philly, and you think the Vikings definitely can contend with the Lions given a rematch and that they can contend with Philly. So I think we can
Mm-hmm.
rule out like Tampa, Commanders, the Rams, and the Packers. So in terms of like trying to build
Agreed.
these teams and kind of projecting for the Super Bowl, we're not
Mm-hmm.
going to go that route. So we're not going to get crazy and do any Jaden Daniels, Baker, or
Mm-hmm.
Puka. Well, we still could add Puka, but we're not looking to build a Ram stack, um, predicting
Yeah.
they're going to make the Super Bowl run. Right?
Right.
Okay,
Correct.
so
Correct.
AFC.
I know you. I know you are opposite of me. Correct. I know you like the Rams in that game, and
I do like the
it's
Rams in that game. I
yeah.
think the Rams.
I'm really interested. I can't wait for that game, honestly, on Monday
Yeah.
night now. So just because of the way this line is going, and I'm so
Mhm.
surprised by it because I really just think that the Rams overachieved. Think about it. This is a team that lost their leader on defense, Aaron Donald, in the offseason. Pretty sure, if I remember correctly, they were supposed to finish dead last in the NFC West. It was like a rebuilding year for the
Mhm.
Rams here. And
Yeah,
they go out
surprise.
and they come out and they win the NFC West over the Niners, the Seahawks, and the Cardinals. Three teams that Vegas had more of a season total on all of them. So I really just think they overachieved. But it's to your point that McVay is, if not the best coach, one of the best coaches in the NFL.
I
And I just
I
think
just
they're
think
going to run into a team that's just has more talent than them.
listen, it's a team game, but as a Patriots fan, for many years, I've seen the X factor of Belichick and Brady, and
Hmm.
McVay and Stafford, I think are X factors. When you look at, listen, Kevin O'Connell, very talented. Okay, I think he's a great head coach. He's done very well. And Sam Darnold, great comeback. Okay, after being kind of like this forgotten guy bust, right, from years
Hmm.
ago. Um, but when I'm comparing, and again, it's a team game, but when I'm comparing McVay Stafford to O'Connell Darnold, I don't think it's close, especially in terms of playoff experience.
Yeah, I can't
And,
argue that, and I think
and I just
Vegas
think
agrees with you, and that's
I
why it's a pick 'em.
yeah, so like that kind of stuff like matters to me, like playoff
Hmm.
experience. No, the lights are not too bright. I
Hmm.
don't. I expect the Rams to be ready to play. I'm not saying the Vikings won't be ready to play, but it kind of was like a wake up call because I did like the Vikings, and maybe one game shouldn't bias me, but when
Hmm.
you're fighting for the number one seed, like I don't know, man, like it was you said this. You gave this hypothetical. Nelson, if it was a 31-28 game, would you still like the Vikings? Yes. Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a
Hmm.
31-28 game. It, you know,
Right.
so
Yeah.
that gives me pause to think like, man, I don't know. Like or is this Vikings team kind of fake, Darnold turn into a pumpkin? Is that possible?
Well, I mean, I think when you're thinking that, it's the two ways of thinking, right? It's my way of thinking of, hey, do I trust and believe what I watched for the last 3 months, week in and week out with this offense and this team on both sides of the ball, or do I
Mhm.
just chalk it up to one bad night? You're looking at it the opposite of me. You're saying, hey, what I saw on Sunday scared the shit out of me. And Vegas again agrees with you because they said, all right, Darnold wilted under the pressure of the big stage on Sunday night. He's going to go do the same thing against a team that could seize the game print, the blueprint. They're going to implement it again. They got some animals on defensive line there for the Rams that could cause a lot of pressure. And if the
Mhm.
Vikings offensive line doesn't hold up, we might see the same thing again. You could totally see Stafford and Puka going off, connecting all over the field, and the Rams going up and down the field here. And now, can the Vikings keep up? So
Sure.
I am definitely worried about that game, and if that game goes wrong, it's going to change a lot of my playoff contest across the board because I'm planning on the Vikings playing a few games here in this playoffs.
Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, AFC.
Yeah.
I think we both agree that we expect the Bills and Ravens to face each other in round 2.
Yeah, and isn't it unfortunate that I just wish they had could go another round without playing each other, but
Yeah.
it is what it is.
And so this is interesting because on the show yesterday with Dan and Maddie,
Yeah.
we were kind of in the minority here where we felt that the Chiefs could be one and done. And I think so. Here's the thing. This is what we got to think about when we go to build this lineup is, are we going to just not full fade, but are we going to use Chiefs as a kicker or defense, or are we going to put in a Kelsey, a Worthy, something like that? And my thought process is this. Yes, it's Mahomes. Again, 2-time Super Bowl winner. They've won it, 2 years in a row. Andy Reid, X Factor, good coach. All the things that I just talked about with McVay and Stafford, right? So all the more, here are the defending champions, and I'm over here talking about one and done. They might be getting – so I keep going back and forth on this because I feel like they've been very lucky in some of their wins, okay? And I think that a couple of breaks here and there, they could easily have lost 3 to 4 more games than what they did this year.
Easily.
But their defense is good. So when we look at teams how they're going to advance, they've got to suffocate. They got a solid defense. And you have Mahomes, and they're just getting healthy at the right time. They have Hollywood Brown back, okay? Talk about spreading the ball, right? Xavier Worthy is now just coming on, right? Pretty much a bust rookie season in terms of fantasy, right? We had high expectations for him after that week 1 game, opening week, and it never materialized, right? You have Hopkins, veteran receiver, Kelsey, veteran tight end, looks washed, but always finds a way to get it done.
Shows up in January. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. He looked washed last year to end, towards the end of the season, and then he had a great playoff run, right? So
yeah. Huge.
I don't know about totally fading them on my teams. I'm definitely gonna have Pacheco and Hunt. I think that's kind of proven that that's just going to be a committee, and it's a shit show that I don't want to really have to deal with. So I'm not worried about those guys. But having a Kelsey, having a Worthy, or building a Mahomes team in case, I'm going to be all in on Lamar and Allen, and one of them's going to lose possibly in the not possibly. I'm saying possibly they should win their first round game. They're going to match up. One of them's going to lose. So I'm going to lose I'm going to lose 50% of my teams in all my playoff contests that I've been, putting together. But in this particular format, if I go all in either Lamar or Allen, and then it's Mahomes again in the Super Bowl,
egg on our face.
I can't win. I can't win this contest. So do I fire, a couple of bullets with Mahomes?
Yeah. Well, all right. So I got a lot on this thing because this is my other thing. I think all these contests, the first question you have to ask is, where do you stand with the Chiefs and this run? Okay. I honestly think that's your biggest question mark here with these playoff contests, because I feel like the consensus across the board is who's on the Lamar bandwagon, who's on the Josh Allen bandwagon. Let's go. We're hatching our playoff contest lives to those two quarterbacks, and it's going to come down to the week 2 game between the Ravens and Bills and who wins. And then we got our quarterback X4 because they're the exciting fantasy stars that run and everything. And everyone here is forgetting again this year about the Chiefs, that ho-hum. They want you to forget about them. They fade into the background. And then we're a Super Bowl Sunday sitting around watching another Chiefs Super Bowl as usual. And I just can see it happening now, Nelson, that Mahomes, we're sitting here talking about how do you fade this contest, right? And none of us are talking about, all right, well, it's right in front of our face. You fade Lamar, you fade Josh Allen, and you send Mahomes to the Super Bowl again, maybe. Mahomes should maybe be the quarterback. But why? We all have that sour taste on our mouth. If you owned Mahomes this season in fantasy, okay, yeah. you have that sour taste in your mouth. He's not sexy. He's not fancy all year long. But he didn't have Hollywood, right? Now he's got Hollywood. His team looks, a lot better offensively. He put up a couple decent games down the stretch, fantasy-wise. And can't you just see, especially like we talked about it yesterday, if Houston somehow beats the Chargers at home in week 1, Kansas City's sitting there on AFC Championship game Sunday in their backyard. And if you don't have Mahomes and you didn't stack these Chiefs to go along with it, what are you doing? You're just sitting there praying that your Lamar or Josh Allen, Bills or Ravens, can go into Kansas City, finally get it done. So yep. I think it's definitely a discussion here. He's got all his weapons, like I said. Now it's the offense is as healthy and looks as good as it has all year long. I wouldn't be shocked if Mahomes comes out, puts up 330 plus point fantasy games, and is what 25% sub 25% owned in this contest, and everybody that's just like, man, you wanted to fade Mahomes and the Chiefs, you idiots! After watching what we watched the last 5 years, eggs on your face. You were chasing the Lamar Josh Allen dream. Mahomes was right in front of us. And that's what you're talking about, Nelson. And yeah, I will be building teams with Mahomes.
I will say this. I'm predicting that the Chargers are going to beat the Texans. Okay. And my thought behind this is that I think the Chargers can play with the Chiefs. And I think that they have the defense, and I think they have a good enough offense to and I think it would be an ugly game. I don't think it would be like this shootout for sure. Mm-hmm. And the two games that the Chargers and Chiefs played, the Chiefs did win, but it was a total of 9 points between the two games. Mm-hmm. So basically how I'm looking at it is the Chargers played them close within one score each game. And I think that they can pull that off. They're not going to, it's,
in Kansas City, you feel good. You like the Chargers team that much.
I think the Chargers team is one of the teams that's built that can beat Kansas City.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. I still can't get that Tampa Bay game out of my head from a month ago.
Sure.
As well.
No, I get it. I get it. I mean, listen, I think the Bills and Ravens are built, and Lamar and Allen can turn into like Superman and outplay Mahomes. I think those are the only two quarterbacks, basically in these playoffs that can outdo Mahomes. But the teams I think are good enough that they're built to beat Kansas City. I think the Chargers are the other team that,
Okay, so you lumped in the Chargers with the others. Okay.
Can give them a tough time. I think if Kansas City doesn't come out with their A game, which they haven't more often than not this year, and they've been beating even teams that they should just crush. They haven't crushed anyone. Yeah. Isn't there some stat out there? Again, I don't know it perfectly, but I could have sworn I saw a stat. The only two teams to not score 30 plus points in any game this season, Patriots and the Chiefs.
Did
One
the
team's got
Chiefs
the number
break
4
their?
pick
Yeah,
overall, and the other
definitely.
team's the
It
number 1
definitely
pick.
was. Yeah, the
Okay,
Chiefs
so
definitely had that distinction for a long time. I think it was 30 straight games they went without scoring 30 points, which is ridiculous.
so obviously that tells me, listen, they're the number 1 seed because their defense carried them. But what I'm saying is, like,
Yeah.
it seems like every game they don't show up and just put a team away and make it a decisive victory, and it's, game over at halftime. It's always like, it's
Mhm.
always right there. And like I said, watching the games this year, there's been some games where it's like either a questionable referee call that, it's a penalty that goes against the other
Okay.
team that favors the Chiefs. I'm not a
Uh-huh.
Chiefs hater,
No,
whatever.
you
I could
saw
care
what we
less.
all
But
saw.
I'm
You saw what we all saw and watched all year long. Their games were boring. Their offense sucked. They were sneaking games out just by their experience and coaching. They were getting by. Ho hum. We won 20-17 again, 23-20. And I don't know if we're going to fall into that trap, Nelson, of judging that team that we watched all year long adjust to losing Hollywood in September, Rashee Rice, then trying to change their offense, and then losing Pacheco. And now, can we judge them in January as the same team that we judged and watched September, October, and November?
Yeah.
There is a thing. It's, I made this mistake. Here's a quick story, Nelson. I made the mistake. I was a Patriots hater. Okay. Your team.
Mhm.
I hated Brady and the Patriots, and I would bet
So,
against
Chris, you
them
made this
each
mistake
year.
multiple times then.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, go
And
ahead.
that's why I'm not going down this road, because
Continue.
this is the same thing a decade later, where every year I would say Patriots lost another couple guys on that offense. Oh, their offensive line is shit. They have no running backs this year. Their receivers, it's just Edelman this year. And this is the year they're going to lose. This is the year they fall apart. And the coaching and the quarterback would get it done. That combination, they were just better coached, smarter than every other team, more disciplined, all of it. And like you said, coaching and quarterback combination means everything. So who are we to have this presented to us again? Okay. And I've been betting against Mahomes the last couple of years. Okay. Hand up. Again, I'm an idiot. Going, I didn't like them last year. Remember last year how bad they were? Down the stretch, they lost to the Raiders the last week or two in the season, and went into the playoffs. I was like, they're losing quick, and then there they were again in the Super Bowl, winning it. It's I'd rather lose my money elsewhere than lose it betting against Mahomes and Andy Reid. Is what I'm saying. And now that the
more,
offense is healthy, I think they can go back.
The more I thought about it, Chris, the more I came to that realization also, that at the end of the and I should know this better than anyone, from years of watching Brady, perform with kind of below average offenses, for many of the years. Like, you just look at the talent around him, and you're like, whatever. Like, no superstars except 07, with Randy Moss, when they had Moss and Welker and Dante
Oh, I'm
Stallworth.
talking the teens. Yeah, I'm talking the
Yeah,
teens
you're
years.
talking the
Like
team.
when
Yeah,
it would
later
be like,
years.
this
Yeah,
team's gonna go again to the Super Bowl? No way. And they would
no
be
shot.
there.
Yeah,
You know?
and that's the thing is, like Brady, Mahomes, they'll be in the game at the end of the game, and he'll suck all game long, and then he'll make the play when it needs to be made to win the game. And and then Andy Reid and the coaching and just the top-notch defense will make the stop when it needs to be made. So those are like the intangibles that, we don't really talk about and factor in. We just kind of come up with an opinion. And that, that was my opinion of the Chiefs. Are like, oh, they're one and done. This team, they haven't looked good all year. They're lucky to be, the 1 seed and this and that. But they're getting, I'm looking at it now, trying to unbiased myself and say, man, they got Hollywood Brown back. They got another playmaker that can stretch the field. I'm like, this actually, like Josh Allen, like this is harder to defend for defenses because it's not like they have like this number one receiver they got to feed, right?
Yeah.
And they don't care about feeding Kelsey. They've shown that, this season, right? But when the time
Hmm.
comes and it's time to make a play, they'll go to Kelsey, but like they just spread the ball around. Mahomes is just going to find the open guy. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I just think they have a lot. I just think they have a lot of weapons now with Worthy coming on and Hollywood back and looking healthy. Now with the four of them out there, you have that possession receiver underneath with D Hop. I, you know, I just I could see them going to the Super Bowl. And with all that said, I've been on the Ravens all year long, and I thought the Ravens were built this year as the team that was going to beat the Chiefs and go to the Super Bowl. I still feel that way. I still feel somehow that Lamar gets it done, but I don't know how you see that Ravens Bills game. I think you're with me that you like the Ravens going into Buffalo, a team that I didn't like all year long, honestly. That proved me wrong all year long was Buffalo. But when I look at the Bills as a whole, especially defensively, I know they're playing a little bit over their head, but I still think the Ravens are that team that could go on a run here. I just hope that Zay Flowers is healthy enough because that'll change my opinion, I think.
Yeah, I just think that, listen, the Bills are solid. They're solid on defense, but I just think the Ravens defense is just better overall. They're better at stopping the run, and their Achilles heel had always been the whole season at they just get torched by wide receivers. And I feel like their secondary, whatever changes they've made, they've improved recently. So
yeah,
and then
they were
Lamar,
terrible in September and October and came around. Yeah.
Yeah. The Zay Flowers injury is a little bit of a factor. But they weren't even like using Zay Flowers like a ton. It's just the fact that like he has to be accounted for in his speed for defenses. And
That's
now,
more of what it is.
yeah. And now he's off the field and now
And how does the offense look with
yeah.
no speedy Zay Flowers running over there? Because he opens things up for the underneath catches to Andrews and to to get Bateman open. Now without Zay Flowers out there, I think that whole passing game looks a lot differently. But we'll see. I think they could get by in week one without him.
Yeah. But is that a huge worry, though? Because you still have Lamar and Derrick Henry in the run game.
Mm-hmm.
And if the defense is going to keep the game close, okay, and you're running the ball, and then Lamar's making plays to Bateman and to Tylan Wallace and to Likely and to Andrews, all kind of like, we're like, oh, whatever. Like, come on, these are no names. But Bateman down the stretch has been good. Andrews woke up. Isaiah Likely is a mismatch. I don't know. Like, I don't think like that game, them going to Buffalo, that's like, Buffalo, definitely wins. I do think it's a pick 'em, but I do like the Ravens. I do like the Ravens better than the Bills. But
yeah, I'm
50,
with you.
50.
But you said the guy I think is a difference maker here. Is you remember last year how big he was down the stretch and into the playoffs. But I think Isaiah Likely could play a huge role here in the next couple of weeks. He'll be on the field a lot more, especially this first game. I know in a lot of my underdog drafts that I've been doing this week for the playoff, I've been making sure I get Likely on the team, hoping that he's a difference maker. And, I could see him being maybe their go-to guy offensively in the pass game. He might be that guy that goes 7 for 75 and a touchdown these couple weeks. And someone like that, maybe you think about adding into this contest in second week or third week, if we get news that Zay Flowers isn't going to make it back as a difference maker. But
now,
yeah,
with that thought, Chris, and I'll let you finish if you have any other thoughts. But if we go to our lineup build, okay, and we start building this team, the first thing I wanted to throw at you was this. We can talk about, okay, what are the two teams you want to just full fade, like you have no interest
Mm-hmm.
in? Or the one thing I did want to talk about is Lamar Allen and putting both in the lineup. And hear me out on my
Mm-hmm.
my theory behind that. If we don't really know, like if you don't really have a favorite, I can say I like the Ravens, but I mean the Bills. Let's say both teams win this weekend, and
Yeah.
Ravens go to Buffalo. Who's to say Buffalo doesn't win that game? I'm
Of
not
course.
saying that can't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So if that does happen, and then they go to Kansas City, yes, we've talked about that maybe we need to add a couple of Mahomes teams, especially if we're going to do multiple countries. But
Mm-hmm.
if we're not really sure of like which team is going to go to the conference finals and potentially the Super Bowl, you add both, and then hear
Mm-hmm.
me out. We then figure out between the Lions, the Eagles, the Vikings, right? And we put in players like Saquon, Gibbs, Amon-Ra, AJ Brown, Jefferson, right?
Yeah.
And then the following week, we're not adding Goff, Hurts, or Darnold, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're still gonna hopefully still gonna have Allen and Lamar, okay?
Yep. Yep.
But then the following week, one of them's gone, okay?
And that's when you come in.
Ideally.
Yep.
And then that's when you add the quarterback at that point,
Yes.
and then you go from there. And now our prediction is, okay, in the Super Bowl, we're going to have the quarterback, if everything works out as planned, we're going to have them times two, but we're going to have the position players
X4.
times 4 and 3.
Correct. And you're going to have either your Lamar or Josh Allen that you started off with X4 to compete
Correct.
against your X2 Lions quarterback, Eagles quarterback, when you already have two stud players on those teams in weeks 1 and 2. That's the exact way to play this contest if you're going to be the Lamar and Josh Allen guys that, are heavily owned, the top two quarterbacks in this contest, and how you play them together. You can't, that's the way you got to think about it. That's the way you play it out. That third week, when one of these guys, whoever loses to the other, that's the quarterback you're coming in with. It sets up perfectly. Whether you want to go Saquon first round, AJ Brown second round, then come in with Hurts. If you're an Eagle guy, you go Gibbs, Amon-Ra, Goff third round. If you're a Lions guy, Jefferson, Addison, and then Darnold. If you're a Vikings guy, there's all those ways to play it. So there is definitely a strategy, a well thought out strategy, if you start with those two teams, with the Lamar and Allen, 100%.
And I'm not saying we have to do that here, because I am going to do that on a majority of my teams. That's just how I'm going to build it.
Yep.
And if it doesn't work out and the scoring doesn't go as planned and whatever, it is what it is. But that's how I want to build it. And then what I'm going to do, Chris, is by having multiple teams starting off Lamar Allen, I'm also going to build it the exact same lineup, but I'm going to have one team with Saquon, one team with AJ Brown. I'm going to have one team with Gibbs, one team with Amon-Ra. And then I'm going to make sure that I have that mix. So I'm going to have Saquon with Gibbs and Amon-Ra. I'm going to have AJ Brown with Gibbs and Amon-Ra. So that, and that's going to take up, a handful of teams in order to achieve that. But that's kind of how I'm going to build it. And then decide at that point, okay, on this particular team that advanced, loser, Lamar or Allen, I'm going to add Hurts. On this other team, I'm going to add Goff and go out and just do it that way. So that's how I plan on building it. But I wanted to, I just wanted to bring it up because that's another strategy.
There's unlike past years where, there's been a lot of years where it's like, all right, this is the clear favorite in the AFC. They're going to the Super Bowl. I feel and then there's 1 or 2 teams in the NFC. So everyone's on those just 2 quarterbacks. This year, I just think there's so many different ways to play this contest and combination-wise that everyone's going to have so many different lineups. Usually, I feel like in this contest, you look at each team in the playoffs, and it's like, all right, that team, I'm taking this player. That team, this player. Well, this year, it's so wide open and so many different ways to play it that it really is going to be interesting how to build it. We touched on a handful of ways to build it right there. So you people listening at home, feel free to build it however you want. But I think the common denominator is figure out who you like going to the Super Bowl and try and get one of those quarterbacks at X4.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of my teams will probably have Lamar as my quarterback to start.
Okay. All right. So you want to start building it?
Let's do it. Well, let me first ask you, your Super Bowl prediction is what?
My Super Bowl prediction is Eagles-Ravens.
Okay. So we have one common denominator, and that's the Ravens. We're both on the Raven train. Okay. I think it'll be Ravens and Lions. So my question to you is, let's build it. You know what? You're hosting me here in this in our FTN chat here. Let's go with your thought process here, and let's go with a Ravens Eagles Super Bowl and thought process that way and build it out. Okay.
Well, let me ask you this: if we can go Ravens Eagles. But we still, if we go with my thought process of going Lamar and Allen, your theory, like if you like the Lions, that still leaves us live to be able to do that also the next round and adding, Goff or another Lions player.
That is correct. So I would do it like you said. Like, let's just go Lamar Allen and see how we would build it like this. And I think the next question here is, now that we have our Raven and Bills quarterbacks and they're off the board here, your thought process is, okay, the Eagles versus the Ravens in the Super Bowl. So your next question should be, are we starting off with AJ Brown or Saquon Barkley? Because in our head here, we're bringing in Hurts in week 3.
Yeah.
So do you want to start off with AJ round 1? And then you have the option of Devonta or Barkley in week 2? Or do you want to go the opposite way and go Barkley chalk?
So I'm okay going with Barkley chalk. Okay.
Barkley as the dog barks.
Yeah.
There you go.
So apparently he wants to go Saquon. Okay.
Yeah, I guess so.
So I'm okay. I'm okay going, with Saquon. We don't have to necessarily, fade him on this team. We could go with Saquon, or we could go with AJ Brown. Give me your thoughts. I just know that we just can't go like just full chalk.
And that's why I would say AJ Brown for this team. Let's start getting a little crazy here. We started off with the chalk of the chalkiest right here with the Lamar, Josh Allen. I think we're already in, the majority of what this contest is going to look like. But everyone's going to go fill in Saquon after that. And then I wanted to throw this at you to get a little different. How about filling in as our Lion, Amon-Ra, straight off the bat?
I'm good with that too, because we talked about that with the Gibbs situation. He's probably going to be the guy that everyone clicks on. It's just going to be an automatic click, and I'm going to have Gibbs teams, but I like the Amon-Ra call, because then if we're predicting Eagles and Lions, that's not to say that, again, Gibbs and Saquon can get it done in the Super Bowl, but we're trying to be a little bit different. So, and if we decide once one of our quarterbacks get eliminated, in the second round, we're going to add either Goff or Hurts.
Right.
If
Right.
they're still, if they're still in the playoffs, right? So
yeah, and in my opinion here, this is with the thought process that you obviously, don't have Goff to come into this team in week 2. So you're definitely making sure you put in Gibbs week 2.
and
Okay.
Saquon.
And Saquon in in your 2 running back spots. What that's going to do in my head is, all right, I have to make sure I can open up some running back spots here. And how do we
Correct.
do that? Okay, how do we
way-
make sure we're opening up running back spots? And this is a complete different opposite. This is like an opposite thought process of what I said at the top of the show. With my strategy's always been make sure you have receiver spots opening up, right, for your quarterbacks. This is a flip thought process of making sure the running backs get opened up there. So. How do we do
easier
that?
going the other way around. I will say that, Chris.
Definitely.
Meaning
This is
us going Saquon Gibbs and opening up wide receiver spots much easier than opening up running back spots. And I'll give you an example of why. If we go Saquon Gibbs, we can then go McLaren, Mike Evans, and we're guaranteed an open spot. We can go Nico and McConkey and guaranteed open spot. We can go Puka and Jefferson, guaranteed open spot the following round. So it's a lot. It's way easier to pick stud wide receivers on their team, like true number ones, right?
Yeah.
All these guys that I mentioned are legit number ones on their team. And what you're doing is you're playing them both against each other, guaranteeing yourself that open spot. And then you add Amon-Ra and AJ Brown, and you already have the running backs with it. It gets tricky doing it the other way around because, okay, you can go Bucky, but that's gross going Brian Robinson or Eckler.
Yeah.
You can go Mixon and Dobbins compared to Nico and Ladd. That's ugly, right? And then you can go Kyron Aaron Jones rather than going Jefferson Puka.
We're getting
gross.
ugly. And we're getting ugly. And that's the reason why 2 things. Number one, I was going to say, maybe we hold up on the Amon-Ra pick here and put Gibbs in because we already got away from the big chalk with having Saquon in from week 1, which I think will be 80% owned. Maybe we could still afford to put Gibbs in there only because Nelson, it really starts looking ugly at the running back position. What we did here is go complete fade because there's no Derrick Henry in our lineup. There's no Saquon Barkley in our lineup, and there's no Jahmyr Gibbs in our lineup. The top 3 running backs, we took out all 3. So maybe we don't have to get that crazy, and maybe we could just go with the chalk Gibbs, right?
Okay.
So just because as we get down the running backs here, I think it starts to go, and to add to that, we already wiped out James Cook. We can't even bring James Cook in on this team because we have Allen in.
Correct.
So
and what this does by adding either Saquon or Gibbs is that you don't have to find 2 spots. You only have to find 1 spot for Saquon next round, right?
Correct.
So
correct.
I like that.
Yeah. I think the next thing we do here is I think that Bucky Irving definitely has a spot as a running back now that we did that, and we don't have a Saquon in there, and we don't have a Derrick Henry as well, right?
So what do you think of that game? You think I think the Commanders have a shot to win that game. I don't think it's like automatic the Bucks win the game. So there is a chance Bucky loses, and that could open up a spot. But if he wins, we still have 2 more openings. We have 1 more running back spot, and we have a flex. But what we don't want to do, and this is why I'm saying like this contest, you really have to you have to play this out multiple weeks because. What we can't do is this. if Allen and Lamar win, we're going to keep them in ×2. So we're not adding Hurts or Goff. And
Right.
if next week we're going to have Gibbs ×2, if Bucky wins, and then we go and add another running back that moves on, and we add a flex that moves on, now we're talking that this gets tricky. But I we can keep going because
Yeah.
we can still open up that flex spot with wide receivers. So
We can open up the flex spot. Keep in mind in this contest, just like the regular season, just because someone's in your flex spot, you can flip them with
yeah,
wide receiver. And this is what, as we building out this team, this is how you do that. Back to my original thing that I said about make sure you have two receivers playing in the same game that you like against each other. I think Justin Jefferson and Puka Nacua, you could put them both in safely, and especially in a lineup like this. And feel good about it, knowing that we're opening up at least one spot.
all right, good there.
Yeah.
What do you want to do in the other pick'em game with the Chargers and the Texans? Do you have a lean there?
So I mean, those are the two games. Like I said, I could see both. You know, I could see the Texans beating the Chargers. You obviously like the Chargers. I can't argue that. The Chargers have been a better team all year long. That game just it's just a hunch that I think the Texans could maybe come out of that game. With the crowd and everything, maybe a young Chargers team makes a couple mistakes. Texans win and turn this whole contest and playoffs on their head. And I also, like I said to you yesterday, the upset pick I was making was Washington over Tampa, and that would work out perfect for this lineup with getting Bucky one and done. I love Bucky in that game versus Washington. I think he's going to have a huge game, and then we get rid of him. So hopefully it plays out that way. I do love what you just did with putting Terry McLaurin in. I do love Terry McLaurin in that game as well.
Okay. And listen, either way, we're going to have an open spot there.
Yeah.
One of those guys are going away.
Yeah.
All right. So right now, we do not we don't have anyone from the Texans and the Chargers. We do have Rams, Vikings. We have Eagles. We have the Lions. We don't have the Packers. Am I gonna guess here, Chris, that you're good with full fading them?
Yeah, I think both 7 seeds are going to get faded on our team. I know that's pretty chalky, but yeah, I could see that happening.
Okay. All right. So let's look at AFC. We got Chargers, Texans, and we have the Steelers. We have a running back and a flex spot open. How do you want to go about it?
So to me, this team and lineup sets up perfectly for Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon could come in, be that third running back on this build, especially that you like the Chargers. Our plan kind of gets blown up here. Just thinking out loud here, Nelson, Joe Mixon in the running back spot, Ladd McConkey in the flex spot, and we're good to go, right?
Yeah,
we're fine. We're losing one of them. And here comes our Saquon into the lineup next week.
Here's the deal. Ready? If Tampa Bay wins and Houston wins, Bucky and Mixon stay locked in our lineup because they're going to be ×2 next week. But that means that Ladd is gone in the flex. That's where we put Saquon in.
Correct. So that's how you give it. And that's, the whole point of our show and talking out this contest is that's how you got to strategize and make sure you're opening up spots. A lot of people play this contest where they set it up where they go, this is, these teams are all going to win. This is, I've played it back in the early days where I put my 4 receivers in when it was just 4 receivers, and it was the 4, big favorites, and they won. And then I was like, oh, well, now my quarterback can't throw to any of the new receivers coming in. It's like I'm blocking myself. The point of this contest is you want to get the points and eliminate some of your guys. And the only way to do that is to make sure you have guys playing up against each other. So that's the way I
Then
see it.
in
I
this
do
scenario,
like mixed. Mm-hmm.
one thing I will say that will get tricky. We're going to have to make a decision on a Bill or Raven, because let's just play this out. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Gibbs ×2 locked in. Let's say let's say Tampa Bay wins, locked in ×2. Let's say Houston wins.
Okay.
Houston wins. Mixon ×2.
Okay.
AJ Brown in ×2. Okay. And then Puka Jefferson, one of them guaranteed is a loss. That opens up one wide receiver slot.
Yep.
McLaren, let's say he's possibly a loss. Okay. That opens up a wide receiver spot, right? Or Tampa Bay loses, that opens the spot for Saquon regardless. And then Ladd in the flex, it allows us, again, same thing. It opens up a spot. So next week, we have to add Amon-Ra to this team, right? Let's say he goes in one of the Jefferson Puka spots.
Puka or Jefferson spots, correct.
Okay. Now, we want to add Saquon, right?
We have that covered with the Mixon or Ladd McConkey loss.
Okay.
And now you're going to say the third part of the equation is how do we get Derrick Henry in there?
Or James Cook or whoever from Baltimore and the Bills. Whoever. So we got to make you see what I'm saying? So that's where.
Yeah. Well, we're playing this out where. So we're playing this out where Saquon. Well, we want the Eagles to advance, right? We're playing this out like that. You want to make sure we get a second Raven in, a second Bill in, a second. So Amon-Ra.
Impossible. So we have to make a decision. Either we're going to fade the Lions, the Eagles, the Bills, or the Ravens.
Right. Well, at that point, it's a good discussion here, and we have to play it out where you just said Bucky, Tampa Bay wins, and Houston wins.
And let's just say Houston wins, right?
Yeah, Tampa Bay and Houston both win.
And let's say Minnesota wins, okay? That opens up a wide receiver spot, two wide receiver spots, and a flex. That opens up 3 spots, okay? That's it,
right?
3.
Yeah.
Out of those 3,
that would go to.
We have 4 teams that are. We have the Bills, the Ravens, the Lions, and Eagles. One of those teams we're fading, or not fading, but instead of picking
I hear you.
A player from them, we're going to pick the kicker or defense possibly.
It would be so Jefferson, Ladd McConkey. Yeah. I'm trying to think it out how we would play. We would have the extra receiver spot open for a Khalil Shakir or a Mark Andrews, which at that point you then have to decide, are we hitching our wagon to the Ravens or the Bills?
Correct.
Because you're going to open this team up for a Hurts. Listen, we can't have it all, and like we said earlier in the show, you're only going to hit big and win this contest if what you play out happens. If it doesn't play out that way, then you got to adjust and you got to just set a lineup. But we're playing this contest as if we're going to get this right, and it's going to be the Ravens versus the Eagles. So in week 2, we're bringing in Saquon Barkley. We're bringing in we could definitely get. Well, we wouldn't be able to. Would Derrick Henry definitely be your second Raven to add, or would you then be comfortable bringing in Mark Andrews?
It would be
or
ideal.
a Raven.
Well, here's the thing: if
Mhm.
Houston and Tampa Bay win, we have no shot at bringing in Henry.
That's agreed there. So that's why I'm saying, if you want to bring in Henry week 2, we probably have to adjust here. And the way we adjust is maybe taking
we
out
both like
Mixon.
Ravens, right?
Say it again.
We both like the Ravens.
Yes.
So I'm gonna venture to guess that
Mm-hmm.
you and I both are gonna be rooting for the Ravens to win at Buffalo. So we're gonna want to add Henry, right? I would think
Yes.
Henry times 3 rather than Andrews, right?
Right. So the way you play this, Nelson, if thinking along that lines, is what's holding it's all up is Mixon, right? And you have to take out Mixon, and you have to switch Mixon and Terry McLaurin and make the Washington representative. The Washington representative can either be Brian Robinson in Mixon's spot, or we can go and dig into the Packers and bring in Josh Jacobs for that third spot and play it where give me Josh Jacobs 15 or 20 points, hopefully, and get rid of him after week 1. We're playing this out as the Eagles are going to the Super Bowl, so that's what you got to hope for. So we were actually wrong in putting Mixon in here. I thought it made sense earlier.
I mean, it makes sense if the Chargers win, because then you move McConkey to the Jefferson Puka spot, and it opens up running back and flex, and then that's when you add Henry and Saquon.
Sure, but I'm saying if you want to guarantee that we have the 2 spots,
I think this is where the gamblers in us kicks in, because I think you got to gamble, and you gotta hope that either Tampa Bay or Houston, that we picked one of the losers.
And that was my thought. I was trying to build like a lineup of all plays that I actually like. I like Mixon in this game. I think he could get 20 fantasy points.
But that's why I was saying to you, Chris, it opens up one spot, but like it's gross, but like what guarantees? I'm trying to think here.
Well, let me ask you this. While I threw out Josh Jacobs, and I don't know if you liked it or not, but how big of a difference do you see a Josh Jacobs to a Joe Mixon game here in week 1? Because to me, if we're playing it out, like I said, in our minds, we're going straight through this with Ravens versus Eagles Super Bowl, then this is a type of lineup and build where Josh Jacobs should probably be in that third running back spot in Mixon. You know, does the team get blown up right off the bat if the Packers upset the Eagles? Sure, but we're gamblers and we have multiple entries and we're playing the game here. Josh Jacobs is going to get fed. He's going to touch the ball 20 plus times. Maybe he's the guy that we need to just sacrifice for week 1 to clear up the spots for Henry and Barkley. Once we put Jacobs in there as the third running back for Mixon, now we take Houston's player and we make it Nico for Terry. And now we have Nico and Ladd in that wide receiver flex 4-5 spot where Nico and Ladd eliminate each other. And now we guaranteed Barkley in there. So now we have Barkley and Henry, and we still don't sacrifice with a shit player. We have Josh Jacobs in there. All while still having Amon-Ra come into this lineup next week with the elimination of Puka or Jefferson.
Yeah. Okay.
You're hesitant because why?
I'm trying to figure out the game that Jacobs can have against that tough running defense. So,
and that's what it comes down to. But don't forget, Josh Jacobs has been doing a hell of a job catching the ball down the stretch these last couple months for the Packers as well. And, without Christian Watson there, you had a couple more touches. I think Jacobs gets the ball 15, 20 times on the ground, maybe adds 3-4 catches in, gives us enough points, to feel happy about his performance week 1 and gets the hell out of there. I will be building some teams with Terry McLaurin in it to try and get those points and hope that they lose week 1 and Terry puts up a 25. That's another guy that will see some of my lineups.
I mean,
but again, I don't want to see him week 2.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing.
I don't want to see Nico week 2.
It doesn't have to be Nico. It can be Terry still in there. And then
Houston, not for this lineup. Yeah. For this lineup, it's Lad.
Who do you like better?
Why?
Terry?
No. Why do you say that? No, why do you say that? Because actually you're right, because Bucky's up top. 100%.
It guarantees 100%. Us one of those guys that spot opens up.
So I like Nico more than Terry in this opening week.
Okay.
I really like both of them. I really do.
Out of the one and dones, if we're predicting Houston loses, and out of the one and dones, we think that Nico has the bigger game than Terry?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I like
I see Terry.
You see Terry with a bigger game than Nico?
Against that Tampa Bay defense? I could see Terry with a bigger game.
Listen, let's both agree that it could be either. It could be either one. It could be Nico with a 35 and Terry with a 25, or Terry with a 35 and 20. It's a flip of a coin. I like both of them. I think they both are, 6 to 8 catches each with over 100 yards and a touchdown. Nico's the only show in town, man, and they get him open, and Stroud peppers him to death. So if you want to play that, and listen, I like this lineup that we have in so far just because it's different and it's against the grain. And I don't think a lot of people have this lineup. I'm just looking at it over and over, trying to see where we block ourselves and how we screw ourselves. If Washington wins, that eliminates Bucky, which is fine. Jacobs, we're assuming, gets eliminated. That's fine. So now week 2, we have Gibbs, Henry, Barkley. So we're covered there. We have both our quarterbacks in. We have AJ X2. We have one of the receivers X2. Lad wins and Terry wins. Now we only have one spot for Amon-Ra.
Correct.
That's worked out that way. So if we have Amon-Ra in there, what receiver? No, we don't have our second build. We don't have our second build.
Yeah, we would have the 2 spots would open up for our big running backs, Saquon and Henry, and then one wide receiver spot for Amon-Ra.
And I think that's perfect because, again, we're planning this as an Eagles-Ravens Super Bowl. So we're expecting the Ravens to beat the Bills. So if we want to put in the Bills defense or the Bills kicker in week 2, so be it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we go with the Chiefs defense here. We get an X2 Chiefs defense out of, coming into the second week. And we sacrifice our kicker and hope that, the Bills will take the Bills kicker in week 2, hopefully in a high scoring game.
So you want Texans kicker for this week?
If that's
So that means we're fading the full fade Packers Steelers.
Full fade. No,
my bad. Full fade
Broncos.
is Steelers Broncos.
Steelers Broncos. And you know what? At the end of the day, with this lineup, there's going to be 3 teams that everybody fades, and it's the Packers, the Steelers, and the Broncos. And everybody's going to have to make a decision and stick a player from one of those 3 teams in there, and the other 2 are going to get faded. I highly doubt that some of these, maybe some people say, hey, screw it. I hate the Texans. I'm going to full fade the Texans. Maybe they feel that way about Washington or the Rams. I don't know how you do that. But most people are going to fade the 6 or 7 seeds, right? And we did that too. So I like the way this team wound up, Nelson. It's definitely against the grain. We left out some big-time chalk players while still being chalky at the quarterback position. But we have some names in here that I think will be low-owned. I don't think Terry will be high-owned, and I don't think Jacobs will be high-owned. So I like it. I like the way this came out.
The important part, too, is obviously you want to try to get good games out of the one-and-done players, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you're setting the team up where you're opening up spots for your next group of guys that you're thinking are going to go to the Super Bowl. What is not ideal, unless it's one of those total shit show Super Bowls and it's low scoring, what's not ideal is you have like all your positions locked up and you're going and adding a kicker or the defense of a Super Bowl team, and the kicker or defense is going to be times 3. Like that's terrible when that happens.
Right.
I want to say the only time that was ideal might have been when Tampa faced Kansas City. The Buccaneers defense put up a crooked number in that game. Remember
that was
when
in the COVID Super Bowl? Yeah, the COVID Super Bowl, Tampa, Kansas City. You're talking about?
Yeah, like Tampa just dominated their defense dominated, and
that was Brady to Gronkowski for 2 touchdowns in that game. So Gronkowski was the guy you needed in that Super Bowl, while everybody I think was on Evans that year as the big receiver. But Gronk wasn't having like a monster year. But he showed up in the Super Bowl and killed it.
Yeah, and then years back, I can't remember if it was the Broncos or Seahawks defense also put up like a dominant game, and if you had them like times 2 or times 3, like it wasn't so bad.
Broncos Super Bowl versus the Panthers when Von Miller got the defensive score. And a whole bunch of sacks and a couple interceptions. That's the Super Bowl for Denver's defense that killed it. The Seahawks defense killed it versus the Broncos at MetLife Stadium when they blew them out by 100 in a game that I was such a Denver Bronco Peyton Manning whore that I loved Denver that whole playoff run and took a beating in that Super Bowl. But should have saw that one coming.
Yeah. No, I like this team. I like the way it turned out.
And
then
I do too. I think it's different. And, I think if anybody learned anything tonight, there's a whole bunch of different ways to play it. When you start getting into it and start planning out your thought process of how these games are going to go, just remember to leave some spots open when you're planning out your Super Bowl. And as this contest goes on, you don't want to trap yourself and block yourself in. That's the best advice I think that we can give you.
Yeah. You don't. The other piece of advice is you don't want to go full chalk, but you don't want to get too cute where like every single player you're putting in is like a low owned player. Listen, why the chalk players are there? They're there for a reason because they're stud players. So I'm definitely not I'm not saying that you got to do that across the board. I just think that when you're building a lineup, you got to at least do that with 1 or 2 players. Like the Jefferson play, that easily you could do Addison and just say, hey, if the Vikings lose, who's to say Addison can't outscore Jefferson in a one and done?
Yeah.
And now I have an edge on those Jefferson teams, right?
And that's what this contest is going to come down to is these weeks, like who comes out of we just talked about Josh Jacobs and Mixon. If, a little switch like that, if Mixon has a 28-point game and gets eliminated and we have Jacobs in and he gives a 12, like what a big difference in the long scheme of things,
Sure.
When you're making those little differences. But that's what this contest comes down to is those games where you think you have the AJ Brown and then what comes out in week 1 over here? Devonta Smith goes, 8 for 120 and 2 touchdowns. Now the sub 5% Devonta Smith owners in this contest, they're ahead of the A.J. Brown builds, the Hurts builds, the Barkley builds, and they're sitting pretty. So, you got to think outside the box here and get a little lucky, a lot lucky. Yeah.
Well, guys, again, if you guys are interested, you can visit NFFC and take a look at this playoff contest. It's $200 to enter with a $150,000 grand prize. Also, with me over at FTN, if you guys, have any questions over, different playoff contests, if you guys are placing bets, whatever it is, I'm in the high stakes Discord and I'm answering whatever questions you may have. And I can give you my advice of, how I'm playing it, for the playoffs this year. I'll have a few bets in. I'll have a bunch of playoff teams in these contests. And, hopefully we can get lucky.
Yes, sir. Good luck to everybody. This was fun, right. Nelson.
We're out.